Hello, I'm Mike Bain from Christian Voice New Zealand, and welcome to part 4 as we look at the importance of reverence, obedience and doing things God's way. Today in our final part called Stop Being Presumptuous About What God Wants from You, let's recap over the last 3 episodes that we've been looking at of how King David wanted 2 things to happen as king. 1, he wanted to establish Jerusalem as the capital city of his kingdom. And 2, he wanted to bring the Ark of God, or some know it as the Ark of the Covenant. In our first episode, we looked at the many mistakes that David made and his lack of reverence, obedience, and doing things David's way. We looked at how David attempted to use worldly practices instead of first inquiring of the Lord. In episode 2, after things didn't go well for David in bringing the Ark to Jerusalem, he had a bit of a stopover to his 14k journey for 3 months, and he parked the Ark at Obed-Edom's house, and how it impacts us to have God in our house. Then in episode 3, we see the Ark arrived in Jerusalem, but David, full of joy, had to overcome the darkness of Mrs. David, who had been less impressed. So let's pick up the story of David today and learn what happens when we get ahead of ourselves. And we pick it up in chapter 7 of 2 Samuel, where David, having God give him rest from all his enemies around him, said to the prophet Nathan, and we read, "Here I am, living in a house of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." Nathan replied to the king, "Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." So basically, yeah, bro, go for it. Great idea, except it wasn't. Let me give you an example of what we're talking about in this passage. Doesn't matter if it's Christmas, it's a birthday or anniversary, or even just out of love. A gift that's not wanted is a gift on Trade Me. We give it out of love sometimes, but out of habit, and sometimes out of obligation. Always love the retirement clocks. Great gift. A thoughtful gift as your days end and you've got all the world and the time to watch the hours slowly tick by. Most gift giving is done in consultation with each other, and if it's not, then there's always the obvious hint. A magazine circular advertisement with a huge black circle should be enough to tell you what is wanted. Now fellas, I've got to tell you, a new steam iron, vacuum cleaner, those are not gifts, they're appliances. They may be welcome, but they are not gifts. In this episode, I want to look at intentional giving versus presumptive giving. Thinking and knowing you're doing the right thing in gift giving are poles apart. David in chapter 7 tells Nathan the prophet of his plans to build a temple. A temple is what God wants, but David is being presumptive in his thinking. Come in Nathan again after hearing from God while he was sleeping. Yesterday, Nathan was full of encouragement for David's plans, but now Nathan, the prophet, has the task of going back to his king and saying, nice gesture, Dave, but your heart's in the right place, but it's just not going to happen. Let's just ruminate about what really has just happened here. David wanted to do something great. Sometimes we want to do great things in God's name, so how do we react when God says, nah, that's not what I want? David's heart was in the right place, as yours would be as well, I'm sure. But God says no. And there's going to be some times that God says no to you, no to me. It's not that what we're asking is basically out of order. It's not that what we're asking is wrong sometimes. Obviously it can be, but there's going to be some times where God just simply says no, just because it's not a nice request, but may well be right for somebody else, but not for you. And this is what's happened here with David. He presumed because he was the king of Israel, he was presumptuous in his thinking that this is what God wants me to do for him. Guys, you presume because the house is messy and your shirts are unironed, your wife needs a new iron, vacuum cleaner. But really, would you intentionally buy her one as a gift? God wanted a temple, and if you read down further, it's going to be one of David's descendants, in this case, his son Solomon, who will build the temple. Good news for Solomon is in 1 Chronicle 29, mentions David, who provides the finance to get the job done. But when David heard this from Nathan, did he go all out hissy, kick the cat, wipe the sidewalk clean? No, he acted in a humble manner. You know, David wanted to build that temple. He established Jerusalem as a nation's capital. He had brought the Ark of God to the city and the temple. He wanted to house it and have God at the centre. There's not a lot of details in this passage as to why God said no, but again, referring to 1 Chronicles, you don't have to turn there, but 1 Chronicles 22 verse 8, there are more details for us. One of the reasons that God specifically said that David was not to build a temple was because David was a man of war, and David had shed blood with his hands. That's the nature of war. You kill people, and David had killed his share of people. And God wanted a house to be built, not by a man of war, but by a man of peace. And his son Solomon, whose name is derived from Shalom, will be the man of peace to build the house of the Lord. So where does that leave David? Despite everything we've spoken about in the past 3 episodes, God had other plans. And if we go through from the time that David made mistakes and not inquiring of the Lord regarding the transportation of the ark to Jerusalem and the lack of reverence shown, God still had a blessing in mind. And although God may reject our good intentions, we need to remember God has a blessing for us. David's blessing was the promise, God's proactive actions taken, and the establishment of a royal dynasty through David. God had taken David from being a shepherd boy and made him a ruler over his people. Despite David's presumptuous, bumbling nature, he has been with David, protected him from his enemies, and made him a great name. God promises to appoint a place for his people Israel and ensure that they dwell in peace. Furthermore, God declares that he will make a house for David, meaning he will establish the dynasty in David's name. And today we can read about that dynasty and how that came through the birth of Jesus. So today we can learn from the lessons found in 2 Samuel. We can be less presumptuous. We can never outgive God. We can continue to show him reverence and obedience every day. We can learn from the same lessons David was taught on that journey to Jerusalem. We can understand the importance placed on reverence, obedience, and doing things God's way.